For everything from about photons to chemical processes to cells to small animals to human physiology, and maybe even all the way up to the global level, we do see that somehow consciousness seems to be involved at every single stage.
Yeah.
The kind, as I said, the kinds of studies that are used tend to be somewhat different, and the size of the effects that we see also are different. But just as one example, on the feeling of being stared at. So that's a common experience, and we, in that case, in the laboratory, we very strictly isolate people so that the person who is being stared at is isolated, but in a room with a camera pointing at them. So the camera is on all the time, and the person who's being stared at doesn't know when somebody's actually looking at them through the camera. So rather than asking them to report when they think they're being looked at, which is something, by the way, that my colleague Rupert Sheldrake has done many experiments like that.
Yeah.
Instead, we wire up the person so we look at their physiology. We look at their heart rate, their pupil dilation, their skin conductance, all kinds of different things, which are indications of what's going on below the level of awareness. And so we have periods where somebody is looking at the camera image of the other person, and then periods where they're not looking. And we look at how physiology changes when the staring is happening versus not. And so I forget how many, maybe 1,000 sessions that have been studied like this using, I forget, 36 experiments, something of that sort. And it's quite clear that some people are better at this, both at the staring side and also the receiving side. But overall, the evidence is pretty clear that when you stare at somebody, even if they don't know it, that physiologically you become activated. Your sympathetic nervous system becomes activated. So that's consistent with people say out there in the real world, that they just felt agitated somehow and turned around, and sure enough, somebody is staring at them.
Yes, that's very common.
Yeah, but this, of course, is done in a highly controlled circumstance. So again, we can tell maybe out in the world, maybe your peripheral vision saw somebody in a reflection, or you heard something, but we get rid of all of those possible explanations, and we still see the effect.
Yeah, it's. I mean, these phenomena are so common, and you, as you say here, as you explain, there have been so many experiments conducted and so many trials conducted that are, I mean, rigorously scientifically done, and yet there are so many skeptics still. You mentioned Rupert Sheldrake. I know he's been subject to, I mean, scorn, and he's been mocked because he has, explained that these phenomena are real, like the sense of being stared at, and also dogs knowing when their owner is coming home and things like that. I mean, if these are totally natural phenomena, and there are so many experiments showing that they are real, they're happening, why is he subject to scorn? What's happening here?
Well, a lot of scientists think that these kinds of phenomena as real are impossible. That's their belief. So where does that belief come from? It comes from, typically, a scientist has 20 or more years of education, and either these topics are not raised during that time, so that's just never a thing, or it's raised in a negative way, that these things are coincidence and misapprehensions and so on. And so the colleagues have looked at textbooks in psychology and sociology, and mostly in the life sciences, to see how are these kinds of experiences described within textbooks. Almost in every case. There are one or two minor exceptions, but the overall way that these kinds of experiences are portrayed, especially in psychology textbooks, it's that it's wrong. It's not real. It's illusory, or it's coincidence, or something like that. So it's not real. And so if you can imagine 20 years of getting that pounded into your head, and combined with the taboo in the academic world where you're not supposed to talk about this stuff, not only in psychology, but even in places like religious studies and anthropology, where these kinds of phenomena saturate the anthropological and religious lore, you're not supposed to talk about it. So there's a kind of a large-scale schizophrenia going on, or a taboo where people can have these experiences, and I know many academics do have these experiences like anybody else, but you cannot talk about it at risk of your career. So you back up again. Well, where did this come about from? Mostly it came about, I think, during the Enlightenment, when the sciences as we currently know them began to arise. And so the science is a certain worldview called materialism that assumes everything is made out of matter and energy, and that's it. And so you notice I didn't mention something there like, well, we also have internal experience. And so within the neurosciences, the only way then to understand internal experience is as activity of the brain, because that's all there is. There's a brain thing. There is nothing else in there. Well, this is such a strong, materialism as a worldview, as a way of thinking about how things work, is extremely powerful. And it's so powerful it has given rise to technologies that allow us to do this kind of interview, for example. And so I remember
it's a prerequisite for developing that kind of technology to have a materialist view.
Well, for developing the technologies that we have today, yeah. Our worldview has allowed us to create technologies based on the worldview that has changed the world radically from where it was 1,000 years ago, or even a few hundred years ago. But it leaves out something. And so now we're in the midst of a renaissance of changing the worldview, because finally it has been recognized that materialism is an extremely powerful and an effective way of understanding reality, but it does not describe everything. So a scientist who's trying to create a theory of everything, like in physics, that's a popular thing to do. If that theory cannot account for our internal experience, then it's not a theory of everything. It's a theory of a certain constrained way of thinking about everything, namely the material world. Well, philosophers have been talking about this forever, that there's a big difference here between our apprehension of the physical world, which seems to be out there, versus a philosopher who may be an idealist who says the only thing we will ever know is our internal experience, and everything else then becomes an inference. It's a pretty good inference, because I think you're probably a real person, and I could touch the screen and it seems like it's really there, and all of those kinds of arguments. But nevertheless, the reality is it's all internal experience.
Hello, my friends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit that like button and share the video with your friends. Please support the channel if you can. I appreciate all the support. You can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can make a one-off donation via PayPal if you wish. All the links are in the description box below. Thank you.